You know, you'd think a bottle of Canadian whiskey would be a pretty simple thing. But this one, it somehow managed to spark a massive political firestorm. We're talking province against province, and it's even threatening to boil over into an international trade dispute. So, let's untangle this royal mess. And it all kicked off with this moment right here. I mean, talk about a public statement. That's Ontario Premier Doug Ford literally pouring a bottle of Crown Royal right onto the ground. This was his way of firing a shot, a symbolic one, at the whiskey's parent company, Diageo. But believe me, this was just the first move in a much, much bigger fight.
So you have to ask yourself, right? What on earth could a huge global company do to get a reaction like that from one of its biggest customers? Well, as it so often does, the answer really boils down to one thing: jobs.
Okay, so let's get into the spark that lit this whole fire. It all started with just one single business decision, but one that had some very real and very local consequences. So here's what happened. Diageo, the parent company of CrownRoyal, made an announcement. They said they were going to close their bottling plant in Amherstburg, Ontario. Now, this specific plant handled all their exports, and the plan was to shift all that work over to a new facility in the US. And that brings us to the number at the heart of this: 200. That's how many unionized jobs were on the chopping block in a pretty small Ontario town. So for that community and for its premier, this wasn't just a business decision. It felt like a massive blow. Premier Ford's reaction, it was swift, and it was personal. He basically said, "You hurt my people, I'm going to hurt you." He saw this as a direct attack on Ontario workers, and he made it crystal clear he was going to fight back to protect them. Okay, but here's where the story gets a whole lot more complicated, because this wasn't just a simple dispute between one company and one province. See, Crown Royal isn't just an Ontario product. Turns out it's a truly national product. And to really get what's going on, you have to look at the supply chain. It's actually pretty fascinating. The whiskey itself, it's distilled using Manitoba grain, right in Gimli, Manitoba. It's aged there too. Then, for the bottles sold here in Canada, they get sent to Valleyfield, Quebec for bottling. So that plant in Ontario that's closing, that one was only for the export market. So here's the key takeaway from that. The bottle of Crown Royal that you or I would buy in a Canadian liquor store, it's still 100% Canadian made. The bottling is just being consolidated in Quebec. And this little detail, well, it's absolutely central to the big disagreement that's about to unfold. And this is where a local problem blows up into a national headache. Because when Premier Ford threatened to ban Crown Royal from Ontario's liquor stores, well, let's just say his fellow premiers in other provinces were not exactly thrilled. They saw the whole situation very, very differently. Yeah, Ford didn't back down. He doubled down. He made it clear he was ready to use the full power of the Lcbo. That's Ontario's government-owned liquor retailer. And trust me, it's one of the biggest buyers of alcohol on the entire planet. He was going to use it as a weapon to punish Diageo for pulling out. But then you have Manitoba's premier, Wab Kinnale, who came out with a totally different take. He was pleading for more of a Team Canada approach. His argument was, hey, wait a minute, if you punish this company, you're not just hurting them, you're going to hurt hundreds of our Canadian workers right here in Manitoba. So you can see the two sides lining up, right? For Ontario, it was all about defending those 200 jobs no matter what. But for Manitoba, it was about protecting the hundreds of existing jobs at the distillery, in the grain fields, all the people who depend on Crown Royal being successful. And it wasn't just Manitoba pushing back. Quebec, remember, that's where the Canadian bottling is now centered, they weighed in too. Their finance minister basically warned that this kind of internal trade squabble is the last thing Canada needs, saying it just weakens our supply chains when things are already kind of tense globally. Well, this Canadian family feud didn't stay inside the family for long. It spilled right over the border. And pretty soon, industry groups in the United States started looking at this not as some local Canadian squabble, but as a pretty serious barrier to international trade. The big one was Discus. That's the main trade group for American spirits companies. They definitely took notice. They put out a formal statement calling what was happening in Canada a major trade concern. Their point was that these government-run liquor stores were being used to unfairly block American products. And wow, did they have the numbers to back it up? Get this, as all these tensions were rising, U.S. spirits exports to Canada just collapsed. We're talking a drop of 85% in just the second quarter of 2025. I mean, look at that drop. It is absolutely staggering. Exports just plummeted from over $63 million down to less than $10 million
in a single year. That is a huge financial hit, and it's the kind of thing that gets people's attention, especially in Washington.
But for the US industry, the bigger fear here isn't just about a one-time dip. It's that this could be a sign of something much worse. That Canadian consumers are actually starting to turn away from American spirits altogether. And that could cause long-term damage to the market that goes way beyond this one political fight. So think about this. What started as a dispute over 200 jobs in one Ontario town has spiraled into this incredibly complex international issue. And it's forcing us to ask some really fundamental questions about politics, business, and power.
Like, first off, is this an appropriate way for a government to use its power? Should a province be able to use its state-owned monopoly, like the Lcbo, to just ban a perfectly legal product as a political weapon? I mean, where do you draw that line between protecting local jobs and just straight-up interfering in the free market?
And then there's the other big question. What kind of message does this send to other international companies that might be looking to invest in Canada, right? If you make a business decision that a premier doesn't happen to like, could your product suddenly be banned from one of the world's biggest markets? That's a heck of a risk, and it could definitely make investors think twice. So when you boil it all down, this fight over a single bottle of whiskey, it's not really about the whiskey at all, is it? It's a perfect case study of these huge forces at play. The very real impact of job losses, the cracks in Canadian federalism, and just how complex this whole global supply chain thing really is. And that really leaves us with one final big question to think about. When politicians decide to declare a trade war, whether it's province against province or country against country, who is it that really foots the bill? Is it the companies, or is it the workers and the consumers who just get caught in the crossfire?